Disagreements are literally everywhere. Whether you're hammering out a high-stakes business deal, trying to get your team on the same page for a project, or honestly, just figuring out who's hosting the holidays. It is inevitable. So, welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to completely unpack the science of conflict management so you can actually turn those really tense disputes into powerful, collaborative solutions. Let's get right into it.
There's this profound little insight from the research that I think just hits the nail on the head. It says a purely competitive orientation often wins the battle while losing the relationship. Man, it is so tempting to just go for that short-term win, right? To just assert your power, get your way, and be done with it. But the data clearly shows that when competition is our only playbook, we totally damage long-term trust. We end up sacrificing these huge opportunities for joint gains. So yeah, you win the battle, but the bridge is completely burned.
So, how do we avoid burning those bridges? Well, here is our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off by asking, what is your style? And then map out the 5 conflict styles. After that, we'll dive right into the power of collaboration and look at essential skills in practice. Finally, we're going to unlock the ultimate tool, strategic flexibility.
Okay, section 1, what is your style? To actually master conflict, we kind of have to look in the mirror first. The way we instinctively react when things get heated, it's not random. It's deeply wired into us by our personalities, our past experiences, company culture, or literally just the sheer stress of that specific moment.
So I want to ask you directly, what is your conflict style? Think about it. When a colleague pushes back hard on your idea in a meeting, or maybe a vendor suddenly changes their terms on you, what is your absolute knee-jerk reaction? Do you immediately lean in and push back harder? Do you quiet down and just hope the whole thing blows over? Or do you try to immediately split the difference just to make that awkward tension go away? Take a mental note of your own instinct right now. Moving on to section 2, the 5 conflict styles. To really get a grip on those instincts of ours, it helps to look at a foundational framework. Way back in 1974, researchers Kenneth Thomas and Ralph Kilman introduced a tool that is actually still the gold standard today for measuring how we argue. When we look at the Thomas-Kilmann model, it breaks down into a spectrum of 5 primary styles. Way over on one end, you've got competing. That's that aggressive, win-lose, assert your position style we talked about. Right next door to that is accommodating, where you essentially yield just to keep the peace. Then there's avoiding. That's when you just withdraw from the dispute entirely. Smack in the middle is compromising, the classic give and take where you just split the difference. And finally, over on the right, collaborating. That's our win-win, problem-solving approach. Now, the research reveals this fascinating, kind of dangerous pitfall hiding under the guise of just playing nice. If you lean toward avoiding or accommodating, you really need to hear this. Sidestepping a conflict might feel super safe in the moment, but avoiding it just means the problems grow larger, and those little misunderstandings eventually harden into this deep resentment. On the flip side, if you're constantly accommodating, just constantly yielding to keep everybody happy, you're on a fast track to severe burnout. You end up neglecting your own needs and creating wildly unequal power dynamics. Harmony is great, for sure, but absolutely not if the cost is your own well-being. All right, section 3, the power of collaboration. Look, if we want actual sustainable agreements and productive long-term relationships, we have to aim way higher than just dodging fights or splitting the difference. We need to tap into true collaboration. And let's be clear, collaboration is not just about being pleasant or friendly. Actually, scratch that. It can be really hard work. It's this rigorous process of digging right beneath those surface-level demands to uncover what people actually care about, their underlying interests. It means you're willing to express your own needs directly, work through some really strong emotions without backing down, and actively search for creative trade-offs. Like I said, it takes time and it definitely takes effort. When you put this into practice, true synergy is basically like building a giant puzzle. You aren't just meeting halfway and leaving this frustrating gap in the middle. You're bringing completely different pieces together to build a brand new path forward, one that actually satisfies both parties for the long haul. Which brings us to section 4, essential skills in practice. Because, it's one thing to sit here and say, hey, let's collaborate. But how do we actually pull that off when tensions are sky high? Let's look at some super actionable steps you can use the very next time you butt heads with someone. The research really emphasizes that instead of wasting time trying to perfectly diagnose the other person's conflict style, you've got to focus on your own foundational skills. 2 absolute non-negotiables here: emotional regulation and active listening. Emotional regulation is just your ability to stay calm and grounded when the other person starts getting defensive.
And active listening, that's genuinely trying to hear what they need, not just waiting for your turn to speak. Let's use a really simple example. Picture two department heads totally clashing over a budget. If one of them loses their cool, boom, collaboration is dead. But if one regulates their emotions and uses active listening, saying something like, okay, I hear that your team needs more resources for software. Walk me through why that specific software is so critical right now. They instantly shift the whole vibe from a standoff to a productive conversation. Top that off with clearly articulating your own interests and getting a bit creative, and you're golden.
There's actually a fascinating 2015 study by Wiltermuth and colleagues that shows us exactly how this dynamic plays out in the real world. They studied negotiators and found this wild dynamic when one person acts slightly dominant, meaning they're very clearly stating their preferences, and the other acts slightly submissive, meaning they're cooperating and asking clarifying questions. Believe it or not, this pair absolutely outperformed teams where both people had the exact same style. Why? Because the active listening of one person gave the clear articulation of the other person room to shine. One party felt totally heard, the other gathered all this critical information, and together they uncovered true value creation. It is literally the perfect practical blueprint for collaboration. Okay, Section 5, strategic flexibility. So while collaboration is absolutely the gold standard for long-term relationships, the true secret weapon of a master negotiator isn't just knowing how to collaborate. It's mastering what the researchers call strategic flexibility. See, there is no single conflict style that works perfectly every single time. The magic is in adapting to the context. Think about it. If your supervisor is visibly upset and you need immediate de-escalation, accommodating might just be the smartest tactical move in that exact moment. Or if you're dealing with someone who is truly volatile or unsafe, avoiding them is incredibly wise. If the issue is super minor, just compromise and save your energy. And hey, if you've already created all the value you can and you're literally just dividing a fixed, limited resource, well, competing might be exactly what you have to do. Flexibility is just far more valuable than rigidity. And this adaptability extends to the people we interact with, too. We tend to think we'll get along best with people who argue exactly the way we do, but similarity isn't always best. The famed psychologist John Gottman studied marriages back in 1995 and found that couples with totally different styles, like maybe one compromises and the other avoids, they can actually thrive if those styles complement each other. And this applies 100% to business. When colleagues bring different but compatible approaches to a problem, they almost always uncover blind spots the other person missed, and that leads to a way stronger final decision. So I want to leave you with a final thought directly from our source material. Take a second and think back on your own experiences. When have differences in style actually strengthened your negotiations? And when have they completely caused strain? Look, conflict is not inherently a bad thing. When you manage it thoughtfully, using that emotional regulation, the active listening, and strategic flexibility we talked about, it actually becomes a massive engine for better decisions and way stronger relationships. So think about how you're going to apply these tools the next time you find yourself at a crossroads. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.